Welcome to another episode of Two Old Bloggers on Vikings First and SKOL. And yes, Darren is still here pretending to know what he's talking about. All right, SKOL Nation, buckle up because the Vikings just pulled off. Hold on. Just pulled off the equivalent of swiping right on your ex's hotter, more athletic cousin. That's right. Kyler Murray is now a Minnesota Vikings, as we discussed last week. Our little, speedy, widow guy from Arizona, the former number one pick who spent years dodging both sacks and accountability, is here to save us. Could it be magic or spectacularly flame out in purple? Who knows? It's Minnesota. We're used to both. A week later, half the fan base is already drafting the retirement speeches for J.J. McCarthy, while the other half is convinced Murray's about to channel his peak Sam Darnold 2.0, throw 35 touchdowns to Justin Jefferson on repeat. Meanwhile, Kevin O'Connell is over there rubbing his hands like a cartoon villain who just found a cheat code. And don't get me started on the rest. We signed a swing tackle nobody's heard of, replaced our young punter with a 36-year-old legend who's basically punting on borrowed time. Welcome back Carson Wentz, like he's the reliable uncle that shows up at Thanksgiving with stories. And now we're all staring at Harrison Smith, wondering, is Hitman coming back for one more ring chase? Or just to collect that sweet post-June 1st cap relief? So yeah, it's chaos. It's hope. It's Vikings football in March. So let's dive in before we all lose our minds completely. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, Darren. How's things in the Great White North?
Not too bad, Dave. It's a Sunday, but we'll get by. We're talking Vikings football. How bad can it be?
Well, pretty bad. You've got a cold.
I do. So
it's got to be that spring warm up, cool down stuff, right?
I don't know.
You haven't got to the warm up yet?
No, I haven't got to the warm up yet. No, we're a little ways away from that, but yeah. So apologize for the scratchy voice. That's the best I can do today.
Well, hey, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bob Swede had a post. He wanted to highlight that Jessie Pierce had died this weekend, and she's a Minnesota Vikings fixture, mostly a Minnesota Wild fixture. And we send out our condolences to all that knew her and were friends. One of them includes Tyler. So now, moving on from that tragedy to possibly another one in theme one. And I just noticed that the music played, but the deal didn't. Oh, well. All right. Here we go. Why? Oh, I know why. That's my fault, folks. Here we go. 1 week later.
1 week later. I just feel that we had some really good. We discussed the Kyler Murray signing last week because it happened a week ago Thursday, and as we were doing that, Dave, I thought there were some really good comments and debate during our show last Sunday on whether the Kyler Murray signing was a good thing or a bad thing for the Vikings. Sorry, gotta press the mute button there on that one. But it did get me thinking a bit more about the signing, Dave, and which I was very much in favor of when it happened last Thursday, as folks would remember who watched the show. But I can understand why some Vikings fans are concerned about their team seeming to really move on really quick from the 10th overall pick in the 2024 draft, which is J.J. McCarthy, after he had an injury-riddled 2025 season as a starter and wasn't very effective when he played. I can understand their concerns about how good Murray will be this season when he hasn't really lived up to the potential of being the number one overall pick that he was in 2019. However, as I keep on thinking about it more and more, I just don't see why this move won't work out very well for both Minnesota and Murray. And I'm thinking that because I started to think about when the Vikings brought in Sam Darnold in 2024, Dave. And you had sort of a similar situation. I think you had a quarterback. Minnesota was bringing in a quarterback who had been picked in the top 5 of the draft in 2018. And up to that point, he had not lived up to his potential in the NFL. And we know what kind of year.
He's called a bust.
Yeah. And we know what kind of year Darnold had in 2024 for the Vikings. Overall, really, really good. Excellent year, except for the last 2 games. So, and I think it's fair to say that most Vikings fans, including myself, didn't expect Darnold to produce the kind of numbers that he did that year. So it makes me wonder why there seems to be a fair amount of doubts out there amongst the Vikings fan base that Murray can equal or even possibly better the stats that Darnold put up in 2024 for us. And if you have those doubts, I'd suggest take a look at the careers of both Darnold and Murray before they got here and before they came to Minnesota. And, to do that, you've got it up there, Dave. You posted a whole bunch of numbers. So I picked various passing categories, and it shows the best that both Sam Darnold and Kyler Murray did in these passing categories: QBR, quarterback rating, passing yards, passing touchdowns, completion percentage. And it gives the year that they did the best, their best in those categories, and also the year that they did the best. And when you're looking at that, it's pretty clear that Kyler Murray has had in some cases much better career bests in those categories, and in all cases better career bests in those categories than Sam Darnold did. And if folks want to say, well, you're just picking 1 year out of each, again, go look at the career stats of both these guys, and you'll see that Murray, year after year after year after year in Arizona, he had better stats almost every year. In the years where both of them played a lot, Murray outpaces Darnold in all of those categories every year consistently, and in some cases by a country mile, particularly in completion percentage and that sort of thing. We do have to consider, Dave, that it's different situations for both guys. Like Darnold came to the Jets in 2018. We know they have been a train wreck of a franchise for a long, long time. He had very little to work with there, not very good coaching, I would also say. And it didn't get much better in Carolina either when he moved there for a couple of years. So there's that. But when you look at Murray's case, being in Arizona, that's not exactly been the model franchise for success in the NFL either for a long, long time, and during Murray's time there as well. So I don't think he had it all that good in Arizona either. Maybe not as bad as Darnold, but still not very good. And so again, you can see about how Murray's career bests in those categories are better than Darnold's. And, it just gets you thinking that. Yet when Darnold comes here in 2024, as bad as he had been in his stops in New York and in Carolina, he comes here, he's thrown to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and he's handing off to a healthy Aaron Jones, and he had the best year of his career by a country mile. I think all of those things still apply for Murray in 2026 now that he's with the Vikings, and I'm assuming that he's a starter. And he's also got Kevin O'Connell. He's going to be in Kevin O'Connell's offense. And that seemed to sit pretty well with both Darnold and Kirk Cousins when they were here. So again, why can't this work out really, really well for the Vikings when you look at what Murray did previously in Arizona compared to what Darnold did previously in New York and Carolina? And then what he did in Minnesota. Sure, Murray's going to have to stay healthy in 2026. So will a lot of his teammates. But if this thing is going to, if this thing is going to work like it did for Darnold, health is a big factor. But you can't do anything about health at this point in the year, Dave. We don't know how that's going to turn out. What we do know is what these guys have done in their previous lives at different stops. And again, the more that I look at the careers of Darnold and Murray and what they did before they got here and what Darnold did in his one season with us, that is why I am pretty optimistic that Murray can do that too. And I think most Viking fans, all Vikings fans actually, should also be optimistic about that. And I think it also should make us pretty optimistic about the Vikings bouncing back and making the playoffs and winning the NFC North again in 2026. I know we've got a tough division. Every team is pretty solid right now as we look at it here in March of 2026. But the big thing holding us back last year was the quarterback play. And I think that Murray, if he's healthy, he gives us a big step forward, a leap forward in that area. And that's really, really going to help us. And again, I feel that gets me optimistic about the Vikings. And I think it should get me optimistic, other Vikings fans optimistic about the team and what they might do in 2026 as well.
Key will be staying healthy. But I think
it always is. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you can't do anything about that. We can't anyway as fans. You can't predict it in a lot of cases. Sure, if you pick a player, Marcus Davenport, who's getting injured year after year after year after year after year, I guess you can expect that it will happen again when you sign him. And Murray's got had some injury issues, 2 of the past 3 seasons. So there is some concerns there. But I think the Vikings, that's not something that we can do anything about right now. And what I think might be a little bit better with this, in this scenario for Murray compared to Darnold, is I think actually the Vikings offensive line, again, if it's healthy, it's going to be better than what Darnold had to work with in 2024, which is going to help Kyler Murray immensely and will also hopefully help our running game immensely, which will help Kyler Murray immensely if the running game is good.
And I think that's going to be the key because Arizona's was known for not being very good. And we know with Sam Darnold, his wasn't good at the Jets nor Carolina. And it's, let's see. Hopefully, by Odin's wishes, everybody stays healthy this season and we ride it out all the way to the bowl.
We will. There's always going to be injuries at the NFL level. It's just a matter of whether you get hammered or whether it's manageable.
Well, speaking of getting hammered, here's all that are doing that. Now it's on to theme 2. And in this one, we're going to discuss free agency.
Week number 2.
Yes. There we go. It's a little bit late on that, but that's okay.
No, you'll get the timing down. And I like the long ship moving there and coming into shore. The free agency, we talked about it's been a little bit quieter than maybe we expected or hoped for the Vikings, but as you head into the second week of free agency or the second wave of free agency, whatever you want to call it, Dave, it does tend to get quieter because the big names are gone. Instead of you having dozens of signings happening on the Monday or Tuesday, you've got like a trickle of signings happening throughout the week, and that's what happened this week with free agency all over the NFL. But there's still all NFL teams are still working on. Slowly, carefully working on filling roster holes that they might have. And the Vikings did that this week as well. And I think the most important thing that they did this week was they got their swing tackle for 2026 when they signed restricted free agent Ryan Van Demark who was with the Bills the past 3 seasons. They signed him to a 1-year, $4.2 million contract. The Bills chose not to meet that offer, and so now Vandermark is a Viking with the for us, or at least for 1 year. And it looks like it's pretty clear that Vandermark is the Vikings' choice to be the swing tackle and replace Justin SKOL at that position for the Vikings in 2026. And SKOL last year, he played more than was expected. He ended up starting 9 games for the Vikings overall with the injuries to Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. And he struggled mightily in some games, particularly beginning of the year. And in other games, I thought he played, pretty decently. But the Vikings clearly thought that they could get better, and Ryan Vandermark is their choice to be somebody they think could get better. The question is, will he be better than Justin SKOL? It's hard to tell from a playing standpoint, Dave, because Vandermark has barely played in the 3 seasons that he's been in the NFL. Last year was the most he played. He got 4 starts, played about 320 offensive snaps in total, or 28% of the Bills' offensive snaps. When you compare that to Justin SKOL, SKOL had 9 starts last year, played a bunch of, I think it was, I'm taking a look here at how many snaps. I don't have his snaps last year, offensive snaps overall, but I do know that in his career, in a 7-year career, he's had, according to Pro Football Reference, he's had 26 starts in total, and he's played over 1,800 offensive snaps during that time. So way, way more than Vandermark has played in his NFL career. But last year, in the limited amount that Vandermark played, his PFF ratings were pretty good. They were 74.4. He was charged with giving up 9 pressures and 2 sacks. Contrast that with SKOL, who had a very mediocre 65.7 PFF rating. In 9 starts, he was credited with giving up 27 pressures, which is a lot for 9 games, and 7 sacks, which again is a lot. So last year, small sample size for Vandermark, but PFF considered him a much better player than SKOL, although he played a lot less than SKOL did, 5 less starts actually. But I don't mind this signing. Demark is about a year and a bit younger than SKOL. I think SKOL is a guy who he is what he is at this point, and what he is not very good. And you can get away with him in some games depending on the matchup that he's up against. I think Vandermark, is a guy who might be an ascending player again, a guy that you're buying, you're jumping in on the bottom floor and hoping that he moves up a bit if he has to play. Hopefully he won't have to play. He'll be sitting on the bench or on the sideline most of the time. He'll only get in kind of like after games are decided, and he's playing during when we're in victory formation, that sort of a thing. And hopefully Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw are your left tackles and they're healthy all year. But again, that's hopefully. Brian O'Neill has gotten nicked up the last 3 seasons and has missed a game here, a game there. He's 30 years old. He's getting older. Might not be able to come back from his injuries as quickly as he was when he was 24, 25. And Christian Darrisaw, we still aren't sure if that right knee is right. Last year, it bothered him all year. He ended up getting put on injured reserve the last 4 or 5 games. We know that. He wasn't right at all. It showed in his play. His PFF grades were sub 770, which is the lowest it's ever been for him, and since they've been grading him. He just wasn't the player that he had been in the past, and that was because his right knee was still bothering him. So, and we don't know how it's going to react to this offseason and the rehabbing. We're hoping he comes back 100%, but we don't know. And if it's still bothering him, Vandermark might end up having to start some games again, and which we don't want. But again, I like the signing. Again, I think it's you're never going to find like a good swing tackle, right, Dave? Because the good ones are already starting for everybody else, and even the not so good ones are starting for everybody else. So to get a guy as a swing tackle, you're taking some gambles, you're making some projections. The Vikings are making a projection here that Ryan Vandermark is getting better as he is getting more experience in the NFL and taking to more coaching, and maybe coming here and taking to Keith Carter's coaching will be a thing that makes him, allows him to take a further step up in his play. We'll see about that. And like I said, hopefully we don't need him very much in 2026. because I think for this Vikings offense to really, really be the offense we want it to be, and Kyler Murray to play the way we want him to play, the offensive line needs to be cohesive and intact pretty much the whole year, which it was not in 2025.
Mm-hmm. I see Broski Bears joining us, and he's projecting because his team is probably worse off on the O-line than ours. There's but it is what it is. They're still looking for a tackle. Now, I do believe Demark is going to be a very good swing tackle. If you looked at his PFF grades from last year, they started, so-so, and then they skyrocketed. Last game, he was a stud. Hopefully that continues. He was what? He's had 3 years, I think it is, in the NFL.
Yes.
And so he's going to his fourth year. And I think he's going into the fifth. Okay. But it takes a while for linemen to get it. Yeah. And I think he's getting it. And I'm cool with that.
And he was an undrafted guy, Dave. So he was always going to be a project and a guy who needed 2 or 3 years of seasoning to get to a place where he could play in the NFL and not hurt you. And it looks like he's gotten there. The Vikings think he has. Let's see how he does. I don't think he was any worse an option than Justin School. And there we go.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, we're witnessing Darren transforming into Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, judging by his voice. Possibly. All right. The next topic. Ryan Wright.
Well, yes, we don't talk about Ryan Wright a lot, but we have lately. But last week at this time, the Vikings found, needed a punter because Ryan Wright had signed with the New Orleans Saints. 4 years, $14 million. Surprise to me. I think again a surprise to the Vikings. Hungover again. Come on, Bulldog. I'm not 26 anymore. I can't do that every night in, night out. But Vikings need a punter. This week they found their punter because they signed Johnny Hekker to a 1-year deal. He was with Tennessee last year. Hecker's 36 years old. Hekker is a name in the special teams world that most NFL fans recognize. He was, at one point in time, he was the best punter in the NFL. But now he's 36, and that ain't the case anymore. If you look at, the stats for punting stats last year, whether it be like punting average, net average, touchbacks, pinning, punts down inside the 20, fair catches that were generated, Ryan Wright was vastly superior to Johnny Hekker in all of those last year by, again, a country mile. And the PFF grades also show that. Last year, PFF gave Ryan Wright an 81.3 grade, which is super excellent. And I think Dave, you and I,
for any specialist, that's outstanding.
And I think, Dave, you and I watching the games, I think we'd have to agree that Wright earned those marks. He was excellent last year from everything that, from every game I watched. Hecker's grade was a mediocre 65.7. 64.5. So, Hecker's 36. He's on the downside of his career. Wright's 25. Who do you think has a chance to maintain those kind of numbers? To be fair, Wright did not punt that well the previous 2 seasons. That is true. But again, he's 25. He's just coming off the best season of his career. I think there's a pretty good chance that he can keep at that level or not dip too far beyond it. Whereas Hekker he's on the downside. He's not going to get any better, and he's probably likely getting worse. So I understand the Vikings probably, again, didn't want to get into a bidding war with the Saints for a punter, especially with their salary cap situation being what it was. But, there's no doubt that they got worse at punter with what they've done here. Just, despite Hecker's great reputation, that reputation doesn't do you much good now. He's not 26, he's 36. And punting's a spot, Dave, where, I find it takes about pretty much a whole season to kind of really, really appreciate the job that the punter is doing, because they only punt a few times a game, but as the touchbacks pile up, or the lack of punts downed inside the 20 don't happen, then you start to realize, oh yeah, this guy really isn't doing a very good job at this position, or vice versa. When they are creating a lot of their punts aren't getting going inside the end zone, and they're pinning the team back inside the 20 and preventing punt returners from even returning the punts, then you're like, hey man, this guy is tipping field position to our favor. So it takes a while to recognize that. But last year, certainly I recognized that with Ryan Wright, that he was doing those things consistently for us, and we don't have him anymore. And we do have Johnny Hekker. And again, I think that this is something where, Hekker will be okay, but I don't think he's going to punt at the level that Ryan Wright did last year. And the Vikings special team, again, is worse because of that. Hopefully it won't cost us too much.
Well, Ryan Wright last year was obviously his best season ever. I thought his first season was decent. Then the following year was meh. And then last year was his best. He still had the occasional shank, but Ryan Wright could actually boom the ball when needed and flip the field, and he did it outstandingly. If he needed to drive the ball 70 yards and punch it out of bounds, he did it. And that was clearly an advantage of Vikings. I think the reason why they got Johnny Hekker is to replace Ryan Wright's holding. Ryan Wright was a very, very good holder for the young Will the Thrill Reichert. Well, they need another very good holder for Will Reichert, so they got Johnny Hekker. Hekker, I've been told, I have not found it, supposedly has one clip where he does a no-look hold. He supposedly points. He's down on his knee, and he points off to somebody, rushing off the side. As the ball snapped, he catches the ball, places it down, bang, it's good. If you're that good at that, boy, that's going to be a treat. And Will Reichert will enjoy that. I think that's the reason why they didn't want to spend the money. Obviously, we haven't spent a whole lot of money this year. And one way to keep that down was not to give Will Reichert the big contract. But they went out and got Hekker, who can hold the job down. At least he can punt adequately, and he can hold the ball excellently, which we want. So,
and as Chuck says in the comments, the Vikings are going to score 40 points a game next year anyway.
Right, and we're not going to need a punt.
So we're not going to need a punter. But yeah. And guess who had the longest punt in the NFL last year?
Who?
Ryan Wright, 77 yards, baby. I mean, it's only one punt, but
still, no. Like I said, he's outstanding at flipping the field. I talked with guys from the Dome Patrol, the New Orleans Saints,
right? Yeah,
podcast about getting right, and they're happy as all can be.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I'm sure Broski Bear will tell us that Ryan Wright was trash.
Oh, I'm sure he will. But
and Taylor's a fine punter there as well. But look at his stats last year; they weren't really all that great. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's just an aside. But
all right, we go from punting to that wayward uncle that shows up on Thanksgiving, Carson Wentz.
Oh, that's a terrible picture, Carson Wentz. It's like National Enquirer where they get the absolute worst picture of whoever was on the cover. They're always like in mid scream or something. But yeah, Carson Wentz this week signed a 1-year deal with the Vikings for very little money. And I was a bit surprised with the signing that a lot of Vikings fans are upset about Carson Wentz coming back to Minnesota. And I think that they seem to be centered on two reasons why they're upset. Is one, because Wentz sucked last year. Why would you bring him back? And two, they feel that because they're bringing Wentz back, that this is further proof that the Vikings have completely given up on J.J. McCarthy, and they've done so way too early after just 10 starts. Well, first thing is, hot take here. I don't think Carson Wentz sucked last year. Was he great? No. But the Vikings offense, actually passing offense, in 4 of those 5 starts functioned way better than it did in just about every start that J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer had. The Washington game would probably be the one where I'd say the Vikings passing offense was pretty good there. Keeping in mind they were playing the Washington Commanders, who had a terrible defense and had given up on the season, but McCarthy did what he needed to do there, and he was very effective. But Justin Jefferson's best games of the year came when Carson Wentz was the quarterback. So just Carson Wentz isn't going to be the starter here. He might not even probably be the backup here. So if he's your third quarterback, Dave, that's a pretty good third quarterback, because Carson Wentz, for all of the warts and all the complaints we had when he was starting those 5 games for the Vikings, they did win 2 of 3. He did lead a comeback drive against the Browns late in the game, and a really good one. Like, he did some things. Do I want to see him start in 2026 for the Vikings in any way, shape, or form? No. But again, if he's your third quarterback, I think that's probably the best third quarterback there is in the NFL. And as for the J.J. McCarthy stuff, I think for the Vikings, I said it last week, J.J. McCarthy, he had trouble staying on the field last year. When he was on the field, he didn't play very well. So I don't think he's given the Vikings any reason to give him benefit of the doubt to be handed the backup job, or certainly the starting job, and maybe even the backup job here. I think he's got to earn that. So that doesn't bother me at all. The other thing that, and I think partly whatever role J.J. McCarthy has in 2026 with the Vikings a lot of this is partly up to J.J. McCarthy. Like, if he has to improve vastly on what he did last year, that's what he's trying to do this offseason. But if he can come back and play well and improve on the things he needs to improve on, put his nose to the grindstone, he can, again, rebuild his reputation in the NFL as being a guy who you can put in there and be a starting quarterback, and a legit starting quarterback in the NFL. So I didn't say he was good, Delton. I said he didn't suck.
There's a difference.
Let's be accurate with your criticisms of me. But with J.J. McCarthy, like, again, it's up to him. He can rewrite his story, and he has an opportunity to do so, and we'll see if that's what happens. The other thing with this whole quarterback situation is, with Kevin O'Connell, what he's faced with. In 2023, he had to start 4 different quarterbacks because of injuries. Last year, he had to start 3 different quarterbacks because of injuries. So given that history, I don't think it's a bad thing for the Vikings to add as many quality quarterbacks as they're willing to keep on the roster with that past history that they're dealing with. So I got no problem with Carson Wentz being your third quarterback on the Vikings, if that's what it turns out to be, and J.J. McCarthy is your backup, or it gets switched around. Well, if J.J. McCarthy can't beat out Carson Wentz for the backup quarterback, I would say you got a problem with J.J. McCarthy, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. I agree. 100%. I agree. And I do believe it's going to go Murray, J.J., Wentz, and then Max Brosmer will be your practice squad quarterback, at least as of now. They may sign an undrafted free agent or even draft somebody to be that 5th QB, but we'll find out. Yes, Drew, I agree. And it's going to be interesting this year when you talk about no preseason time. Does KOC change his preseason pattern of wrapping everybody in bubble wrap to say, no, you got Kyler Murray, he's going to need time to learn the offense and get in sync with everybody. You got JJ, his snap should go up because he'll be number 2. And then The only one I can see not is Wentz. But even with Wentz, I see it. Now, Wentz, everybody says, yeah, Wentz is going to be it. He's still recovering from his shoulder surgery. Everybody forgets that he had his labrum worked on, and then he had fractures up there, and he had his labrum redone. That's a minimum 6 months recovery. He's still got 2 months more before he's able to get full movement and do the things he needs to do. So,
fortunately, it was his non-throwing shoulder, but
yeah, fortunately,
but still, he's not yet 100%. The preseason thing, Dave, I think it's going to be like Kyler Murray being his first time in Minnesota, working with the Kevin O'Connell offense. Yeah, he'll need time to adjust to all that and get it down. But Sam Darnold was in the same situation in 2024, and he played one series in the preseason.
Which is true, but which I think was a mistake.
But not if you look at the way Darnold played in 2024. It didn't bother him.
He didn't start out great.
Well, he started out fine.
Correctly.
I mean, the Vikings went what? They were like what 4-0, 5-0 at one point. Yeah. But I don't think Murray, if he's the starter, is going to play any more than a series. That's the way it's going to be. J.J. McCarthy is going to be the guy, and Max Brosmer are going to be the guys that are going to play the vast majority of the preseason, and they should. Carson Wentz don't need any time in preseason. He's done this for a gazillion years, and Kyler Murray too. And the other thing about preseason is the more I watch it, if you're not going to have your starters in there with your starting quarterback, then what's the good of it? Also, if you're playing a bunch of second and third stringers in the second and third quarter, what is the good of it? You're going to get a bunch of results that are false because you're playing a bunch of guys who are never going to play regular in the NFL, and you're going to look great, but does it accomplish a whole lot other than getting you on the field?
You're still working as a team. It's the whole Rex as a team.
That is true. That is true. So maybe on your
side, bad competition,
you still got to do the thing, I guess, and do it well, which is true. But I don't see Kyler Murray playing any more than 1 or 2 series in this offseason, or sorry, this preseason. And I think J.J. McCarthy particularly is the guy. I'd like to see
the majority of it.
Yeah, like 80% of the snaps, I'd be good with that because I think he needs it, even if he is playing with the 2s and the 3s and the 4s. He needs the reps and lots of them.
And yes, he's out in California with Coach Beck.
Yeah,
getting coached up, and hopefully it works.
Well, if it doesn't, it doesn't. But he's doing what he needs to do, which is work with somebody who's a quarterback, guy who trains quarterbacks, and get him to work on the footwork, on the layering of passes, on I don't know
arm angle, on all that stuff.
I don't know if they can work on the whole pocket present things, because how can you do on air? Like, how can you simulate a 350-pound guy bearing down on you when you're doing on-air reps? I think that's the tougher part of it. But the other things, he can work on it, and he needs reps, repetition, and let's see if it translates into games.
Yeah, we'll find out. All right. That's theme 2. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3, Dave.
And in theme 3, we are. Come on, open up, you piece of shit. Pardon me, yelling at my computer. This week in Vikings land, as you see the purple bubbles rise in the beer. All right. We're going to start this one off. Speaking of Coach O'Connell, he's here congratulating Harrison Smith.
Yes, as Harrison Smith was going to ride off into the sunset, this NFL career over. Or is it? Because last week I said we'd get into this because we didn't talk about Harrison Smith getting the June 1st cut designation with the Vikings, but I said we would talk about it this week. And so we're going to talk about it a bit because I just had some thoughts on this. And with that June 1st designation to cut the hitman, it does leave out the possibility that Harrison Smith might not be done with the NFL or the Vikings yet. The Vikings, what the reports we heard were the Vikings would love to have him back, and Smith hasn't made his final decision on that yet. And it sure looked like it at the end of last season, right? Like the timeout call by the ref and the honoring of, we're doing this in honor of Harrison Smith. And then he had all his ex-teammates in the secondary show up. Xavier Rhodes was there. Andrew Sedano was there. Jamarcus Sanford was there. Anthony Harris was there. Mr. Raven, if you remember him, he was there. All these guys were there. Some of them wore Hitman jerseys. And I heard they partied pretty hard there too. and so for them to all to show up, and there had to be a reason. They had to think that this was going to be the last game that Harrison Smith ever played in the NFL, and it sure looked like it. So would he really change his mind on that, Dave, after he had his buddies come in and be there for that last game? Well, it is Hitman's life. It is his career. So if he wants to change his mind and decide he wants to play another season in the NFL, then he can do that. And they can just do it all over again whenever he does decide to retire, I guess. But, selfishly for me, Dave, we saw last year, particularly in the back half of the season after, Harrison Smith, he missed some games with a mysterious injury that was never explained, or some health issue that was never explained. And then they had him on a snap count early in the season. But the back half of the year, the last 7 or 8 games, you saw some vintage Harrison Smith. He was a difference maker out there. He was making plays like it was 2015 or 2016 or 2017. And we saw how well the Vikings defense played with Harrison Smith playing as well as he did. The Vikings defense was awesome at the end of the year. So, there's that thought. He looked like he still had it. The other part of it is he's only 1 interception from 40, reaching 40 right now. He is, if he played another season, he'd certainly get to 1,200 combined tackles for sure, because he's only 20 away from that right now. And if he played another season, he'd probably add a sack or two to the 21.5 career sacks he already has. And then there's the whole thing with the Kyler Murray signing and how bullish I am about that, Dave. If Murray plays like I expect him to play, is that enough to get the Vikings to the Super Bowl finally, and Hitman gets a shot at a Super Bowl ring? Those are all things running through my mind if Smith was to come back to play. But then there's the other side of it, which is he just turned 36. That is not an age where most NFL players are still playing football, for one, and two, playing it well. So there's a concern for me that Harrison Smith, he could come back. If he comes back, it'd really be sad to see him being really a shell of the player that we've seen for year after year after year on the playing field, doing the things that Harrison Smith does, intercepting passes, blitzing, sacking quarterbacks, making tackles for losses. It would be really sad if he just showed that he couldn't keep up and that he was well past his prime. Which would be, and then folks might say to that, well, Darren, look how well he played at the end of the season. You're going to tell me 6 or 7 months later that he's totally lost it? And it does seem weird, but we have seen cases where players do come back just that 1 year too many, and they fall off a cliff. And I would just hate to see that happen with Harrison Smith if he did come back. So I'm kind of mixed emotions on if he comes back. Am I happy about it or am I not? But also I want a decision made here, Dave, because we're a month away from the draft. And if Harrison Smith is not coming back, then you've got Jay Ward, Theo Jackson, and Josh Metellus are the only 3 safeties that you have that have played at the NFL level and have showed they can play at an acceptable level. And you're going to have to build out the safety room from there. And so the Vikings got to know if the draft is, they have to, use draft picks to come up with Harrison Smith's successor this year, or is it going to happen next year? So it's just some thoughts on Harrison Smith there. It seems like the past 3 or 4 off seasons, we've had this, this conversation each time about will he or won't he with Harrison Smith, and we're at it again.
I understand the questions, and he did have that medical issue to start off the season. But the second half of the season, he was dead on. And so as long as he can keep it going, I'm cool with that. Broski says stick a fork in it. Well, there are some players that play older and still get it done. So, and the question is there anybody on the current roster that could replace him? Which brings us into the next topic.
Yeah, we're with free agency being what it is so far, Dave, and it being pretty quiet for the Vikings. Probably a lot of Vikings fans are starting to think, if they haven't already, are starting to think about the draft in April and who the Vikings are going to be picking at number 8, in particular at number 18 overall, if they stay at that spot. So I don't know if folks who are watching the show right now, I'm sure Broski Bear knows all about this, but I don't know if people have heard this concept of the wisdom of crowds, but it's a theory that a whole bunch of people, individuals who are not affiliated with each other at all, can sometimes, if you ask them a question about something, they can come up with a better solution or decision than a small group of experts who are supposed to be, again, experts at this certain thing. And so I thought, as I've thought about the number 18 overall pick, I started thinking about the wisdom of crowds, and Sports Illustrated's Vikings beat writers actually helped with this, because last week they tracked all of the mock drafts of the various NFL experts,
including Tyler.
Yeah, that have been made from January up until just a week ago, and tracking who those experts have said the Vikings are going to pick at 18. And so I thought, take a look at that and see what are the trends that are being shown there. And one thing that it showed is that most of these experts feel overwhelmingly the Vikings are going to go defense at 18 when they do pick. And the other thing that it showed is that a lot of them, in 9 cases, actually, a lot of them think that Dillon Theineman from Oregon is going to be the guy that the Vikings pick at 18, which makes a lot of sense, Dave, because Theineman is a guy who's considered a do-it-all safety, playmaker. He rocked at the combine, tested outstandingly, but he's also been a very highly productive safety at Purdue and then at Oregon, can intercept passes, make tackles, good at blitzing, all of that stuff. We know that the Vikings, with Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, he loves using safeties, and he loves safeties who can do it all. So Theineman looks like a guy who could he'd be tailor-made for Brian Flores' system. So that pick makes sense there with Theineman. Whether it happens or not, we shall see. But he was the guy overwhelmingly that these experts feel is the guy that the Vikings are going to pick at 18. Now, do they do that, particularly if Harrison Smith comes back? I don't know. But if Harrison Smith doesn't come back, then certainly Theineman or a few other safeties could certainly be at play early in the draft, because again, you've only got Metellus, Theo Jackson, and Jay Ward, who'd be the guys that would be you're rounding out your safety room right now. You need to get more depth than that. Outside of Theineman, who else did they have mocked that the experts saw that felt they got mocked? Emmanuel McNeil Warren from the SETI from Toledo, who's considered either the second or third best safety in the class, behind either Theineman, and Caleb Downs is clearly number 1 at Ohio State, who likely won't be available at 18. But McNeil Warren was mocked to us 6 times. So was Avion Terrell from the cornerback from Clemson. He was also mocked to us 6 times. So bit of a theme there. Secondary at 18 for the Vikings in the first round. That's what these mocks are showing to us. Offensively, the only players that have been mocked to us in these drafts were Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon, and then Jeremiah Love, the running back from Notre Dame. But I will add that Love was mocked to us in January. That was before the combine, which he absolutely rocked. And nobody thinks that Jeremiah Love is going to be at 18 when the Vikings pick there, if they stay there. Alec Lewis actually put out a mock this week where he had the Vikings trading up to 11 to get Jeremiah Love. A lot of people don't think Love is going to be there at 11. let alone 18. So
yeah, I've seen a bunch of professional mocks where he goes in the top 5, ish, but top 10 without a doubt.
Yeah. George says I say Oregon like a Canadian. Well,
Oregon, you said it properly. Oregon.
I don't know. Hey, Americans always bastardize all the French names. Did you hear Travis Etienne telling people how to pronounce Etienne lately? So it goes both ways. Yes. But we'll see, Dave.
And it's better than Americans saying Oregon because it's Oregon. It's how it's pronounced.
No E on the end of there. But it'd be interesting to see whether these mocks end up coming to life compared to, whether the Vikings are really targeting Dillon Theineman or not. We know they met with him at the Combine, that sort of thing. But it's always interesting to see whether the wisdom of crowds ends up being...
Drew knows.
Yeah. The wisdom of crowds end up proving to be correct in the Vikings case as to who they pick at 18 overall.
Mm-hmm. It is going to be interesting to see. I'm not so sure Thieneman's the answer. I picked McNeil Warren in my mock draft last week on who will be king. He's my preferred safety, but that's just, I have not dove in enough to have a overly emphatic opinion on any of these guys yet. That's going to happen over the next month, and we'll go on from there. Tyler and I are discussing, speaking of the draft, our draft coverage, and it's going to ramp up, folks. Draft week's going to be busy, and you all will love it. Now, switching topics, we have Ty Chandler here. What happened to Ty Chandler?
Well, people might have noticed that on here, that they might notice that Ty Chandler found a new team this week. The New Orleans Saints signed Chandler to, I believe, a 1-year deal. And why am I bringing up Chandler when he's signing with another team? Well, because it puts a bow on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's infamous 2022 draft.
And that's a picture from that draft, by the way.
Yeah. And happier times for Kwesi when he was
I'm sure
still new on the job and everybody loved him. But that 10-man draft from 2022, it turns out that none of them end up signing a second contract with the Vikings. And if that seems bad, that's because it is. Although to be fair, if you look at each draft and look at that 4 or 5 year cycle, when the players end up being eligible for a second contract, generally only 1 or 2 of those guys end up signing a second deal with the team that drafted them. Some years, like 2015 with the Vikings, you get one where you get 3 that sign a second deal with the team that drafted them, like the Vikings did that year with Diggs, Barr, and Kendricks, although Diggs didn't last his whole second contract with us for his own reasons.
There's truth to all rumors, yes.
Yeah, but it doesn't, even with that being the case, it doesn't happen very often where none of your draft class ends up signing another deal past their rookie deal with the Vikings. In fact, the last time it happened was 2016 draft. That was an 8-player class, and you might remember that the top pick in that one was Laquan Treadwell, who some folks might not remember was still playing in the NFL last year. Mm-hmm. I can't remember which team it was. I feel like it was Jacksonville or something like that, but he was still playing with somebody, and he's been kicking around. But he was the guy, Mackenzie Alexander.
Had a nice career because of it, but it's that first round status keeps you in a lot longer.
Yeah. Mackenzie Alexander was a 2nd-round pick that year. He also didn't sign with us. He signed with Cincy. Then he came back a year later. But anyway, so that was the last time that's happened where we've had no one from our draft class who's ended up signing a second contract with the Vikings. And before that, the last time that had happened was the 2005 draft, which folks might remember was the draft where we selected Troy Williamson and Erasmus James with our 2 first-rounders. that draft, and of course, neither of those guys amounted to much either. So,
and that's the draft party I went to with Ted Glover.
Were you guys Were you guys happy with the picks at the time? Do you remember?
No.
You don't remember, or you weren't happy with them?
I don't. I remember Mike Tice coming out and saying, "You can't teach speed." Well, that may be true, but you got to be able to catch some football.
How true? How true? I'm glad you said it for me, Dave, because that was
that's what it was. We had hopes for Erasmus James, but
yeah,
no. And that was a great draft party, by the way. It was at Old Winter Park.
So yeah, I'm sorry to bring up some depressing old news, but I guess if you want to look optimistically about it, it's been a few drafts, probably since 2020, actually, since the Vikings have had a good draft. And we always talk about having to nail the draft, right? The Vikings have to nail the draft. Every NFL team wants to nail the draft. And that 2020 draft was one even though that was the one with like the 25 picks that Spielman had, and he kept on drafting back, into the 6th and 7th round, and we accumulated 10 7th rounders and all that sort of stuff. But Justin Jefferson came out of that draft. Josh Metellus came out of that draft. Blake Brandel came out of that draft. KJ Osborne.
I do remember it.
KJ Osborne was out of that draft too. So it ended up being a pretty strong draft for the Vikings. We haven't had one since then. I feel that the Vikings are due to have a draft where they nail it. And it could be the 2026 draft.
Mm-hmm. Well, last time, like you said, Justin Jefferson, Josh Metellus, and hopefully it is definitely for the 2026 draft. And hopefully there'll be somebody out of the 23 draft.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. But anyways, that's the show today, folks. I want to thank everybody that joined. You guys absolutely rock in the comments. And yes, Drewster will be joining us in the run-up to the draft. We're going to be talking draft. I'll be doing graphics of his big boards. And Drew, believe it or not, is more accurate than most draft analysts when it comes to picks. He tends to nail it. He knows what he's looking for. So I can't wait to have him on, and we set up a firm date. It's going to be awesome.
It will be awesome. And I'm going to be quizzing him about Vikings targets for sure.
Yeah. Well, we have inside the numbers during the season, and this will be inside the draft with Drew Bunting. And it's, like I said, he's usually dead on. But
he is.
Now, the one thing we did not cover this week was that Anthony's on the brain. He said, you guys are bullshit, and punched out. I don't know why Anthony did that, but okay, because we're talking about our safety. But Adam Thielen and CJ Ham retired this week, and which was a cool ceremony, tears everywhere. It was awesome. And if you could watch it, if you're watching it on Twitter, the first few minutes, there's no audio. Just skip to where there's audio, which is okay because it was KOC talking. Nobody wants to hear it anyways. But anyway, this was a busy week too. And now we're going to move on to week 3. We're going to probably start focusing more on the draft, but there'll be maybe some roster filling, free agent stuff. However, I doubt that. I think they're pretty much done until after the draft. We're tight on cap. I think we only have like $5 million left at this point. There's still moves to be made if they want them, and we'll see. And if Harrison Hitman Smith wants to come back, do whatever is necessary to bring him back. If that means building him a runway right near Egan, build him a runway and a hangar. Let him fly in. He doesn't need to be in the preseason or anything like that, but make him happy. So we'll see.
That is true. But I couldn't see, Harrison Smith isn't the guy who's going to pull a Brett Favre and show up in August and say, I'll play now. Like that doesn't seem to be the way he would consider that unprofessional to do that.
And yes, Norsevius, Thielen did not ask to be traded. He signed a 1 day contract for $1 so he could retire, and which was cool. I thought it was cool. Those guys came in at the same time. They grew up together. It was awesome. They both outstanding players.
Outstanding players, outstanding Vikings on and off the field. In there.
And you notice Harrison Smith wasn't there. So that means he's thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, any last words, everybody?
No, sir. But, I'll have to put my thinking cap on, come up with topics for next week. Because right now, a lot of stuff has happened and we've talked about it. And we'll see what the week brings.
I'm sure something will come up. We'll have something wide receiver get busted for sleeping on the interstate or something.
No, we can't. Can't be.
What happened to my camera? My camera just died.
You've never looked better, Dave.
I'm sure. Oh, well, it is what it is. We'll go on from there. What do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks everybody for listening and commenting.
Yes, SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!